My name is Chintan Singh and today's date is February 2nd,
How old were you in 1984?
I was 11 years old.
And what was your occupation at that time?
I was a student. I was in 6th grade in Guru Har Krishna Public School, Vasant Vihar, New Delhi.
Okay, where were you in June 1984?
New Delhi.
New Delhi. And how did you hear about the violence and attack on the Bar Sahib?
My parents and my grandparents, they had been talking about it for a few days before it, that things are building up and it's getting to the point where something like this is going to happen. So I heard it from my parents and grandparents talking about it. And then there was, after June 6th, I think, there was news on the radio.
Okay. So what was your reaction? What did you think or feel when you heard that the Bar Sahib has been attacked?
I was confused, I was surprised. I could not imagine something like this could happen. And why would it happen? Because being an 11-year-old, I had no idea of the situation, of what was behind the situation and what had led to this.
Okay. So what were the sources of your information that you were getting about what was happening in Amritsar?
Conversations, being privy to conversations of the adults in our family, my parents, my grandparents, relatives. And also before that, for several months, my parents, whenever they would go out socially and meet with non-Sikh friends, and this discussion would happen, and I would notice that my parents would get very upset, and they would come back promising that they will never discuss this thing with anyone. People don't get it, people have no idea. People only look at it from one side.
Where were you in November 1984?
New Delhi.
How and when did you hear about the November 1984 violence?
So on 31st October 1984, myself and a few schoolmates of mine, we were in American Consulate, New Delhi. We were there because we had some American students visiting us, and we had taken them to see the American Consulate and the school, how kids living in New Delhi, how American kids living in New Delhi, how do they go to school and what kind of school do they go to. So that's where on BBC the news came that the Prime Minister had been shot, and we found out there. And then we came back to one American student was staying in my house.
On the same very night?
Okay. For about a couple of weeks.
Okay. So what was your reaction on first hearing the assassination of Mrs. Gandhi, and then what followed after?
Well, so since we heard the news in our school, those of us who were at the American Consulate, we heard the news for the first time. We spread that news when we came back to the school campus to the rest of the school. So the reaction was mixed. Some students were happy, some were concerned, but this was a big news, and nobody was sure at that time, is it true or not. But the school decided that regardless, nobody knew what would happen in the evening, what would happen the following days, but our school, out of respect, decided that the Prime Minister has died. For whatever reason, the school would be closed the next day.
Okay. So after coming back from school, what did you see, what did you hear?
So there was a lot of panic. My father came back from his work early. My mother already had purchased a local newspaper, and in that it was the news that she had been shot with 16 bullets in her. There was a birthday party of one of my friends in our neighborhood, a non-Sikh friend, and as routine, I went to the birthday party, but my father came very early to pick me up. And that American child was staying with us, and he says, no, you cannot be outside, you have to be, because my grandparents had heard that there had been violence around All India Medical Institute, and some Sikhs had been killed or some Sikhs had been hurt.
Okay. Did you or any family member or a friend become target of this violence?
A lot of my extended family and relatives had damages of property. They lost property. some extended family members' homes were burned, their shops or their factories were burned. But in our immediate family, nobody thankfully died or nobody got killed.
Okay.
But there was loss of property.
Okay. So, who was committing this violence according to you?
According to us, people had been brought from out of Delhi by local politicians, what we learned. And local politicians gave them money, gave them liquor, from what we were told, from what we heard, the stories. And these people were told to attack Sikhs and destroy their property and hurt them physically.
Okay. Did you continue to live where you were living after the violence?
Yes, we did. Yes.
When did you decide to leave the country?
Well, I left the country in '99. I did not leave because of this reason. I just left for other reasons. But I do know my parents, as well as many other people in their generation, did think after November to move to Punjab, because Delhi was no more considered a safe place for Sikhs. My parents also explored moving to the US, but things never happened, and then things did become normal after a few years, and then we continued to live in Delhi, and my parents still live there.
Okay. Have you spoken about this violence to anyone since?
Off and on, not in this much detail, but off and on. Yeah.
Okay. Did you share this information about 1984 with your friends and family?
Yeah, because I went to a Sikh school, so they were friends of mine who suffered a lot more. Thankfully, I didn't suffer at all. We were totally safe, both in terms of physical as well as property damage. But there were friends of mine who suffered from property to life, everything. So yeah.
Have you had nightmares or flashbacks about those days?
I don't remember about nightmares, but I think I must have had. I do know one thing, that after November 1984, for several years, whenever my parents used to go out anywhere on their own, I used to be worried for them and for us behind. And my brother being out, my older sister being out, I used to be worried a lot. And I used to continuously do Simran till my parents would not come back home. So I don't know, I don't remember specifically about nightmares, but based upon this, I think I must have had some nightmares.
Why, in your opinion, did all this happen in 1984?
Why? To some extent, politicians, instigated people for nothing. To some extent, politicians and the government of India wanted to marginalize Sikhs, the Sikh community in general. So it's a combination of both reasons. One reason was just to gain political mileage, not necessarily anything to do about Sikhs, and the second reason is necessarily to do with about Sikhs.
Okay. How did 1984 change your life?
It has changed my life to quite some extent. I can no longer, sadly, I can no longer, look at non-Sikhs, especially Indian non-Sikhs, and not remember 1984.
Okay. Do you want to share anything else?
Yeah, I mean, it's very sad, especially, it's going to be 30 years, and victims and people who suffered, they've not been given justice, regardless of whatever the reasons may be. I heard Mr. Rahul Gandhi's interview just 2 days ago on the television. I totally disagree with that. He made a comment that in 1984 the government wasn't instigating riots and the government had nothing to do with those pogroms. I disagree with that. Everywhere local politicians, Jagdish Titler and people like him were there.